Here we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Camblin. I'm the current chair for the Virginia State Conference NAACP's Environmental and Climate Justice Committee. I am very glad to welcome you all, and thank you for joining us today as we hear from our representatives from the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. We have representatives from the Commonwealth. We anticipate the presentation from them it's going to be about 40 minutes, and we're going to reserve some time for question and answer. We would like to keep this as informative, as effective, and as conversational as we can. So we'd like to reserve the bulk of the conversation towards the end. However, we do understand that during presentations, there are questions that may kind of hinder how well you receive the rest of the information. So if there is a major clarifying question that you need to ask, go ahead during the presentation, either raise your hand or kind of signal in the chat that you want a quick or urgent review of your question, and we will definitely clarify it. But again, we want to try and keep this as informative, useful, and productive as we possibly can, but also we want to also reserve time for conversation. And at the end, we can hear about what your local issues are, or if you have any policy or process questions, well, when I say we, I mean staff, DEQ will be able to answer. And then of course, I will be more than happy to help facilitate connections if need be, or any other issues that you may have locally. Virginia State Conference will be more than willing and available to help you process those local issues as well. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Danielle Sims from the Piedmont region, and I'll have her kick off the presentation and introduce her team. And thank you for being with us here today. And we look forward to hearing your presentation and learning about DEQ. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Karen, for inviting us to meet with you all and give a brief presentation on DEQ's work. My name is Danielle Sims. I'm the Piedmont Environmental Justice Coordinator. My region covers Northern Neck, Middle Peninsula, and Metro, Richmond, Petersburg, all the way down to the North Carolina border. I will turn it over to my colleague, Gwen, who's next on my screen, and introduce herself.
Thank you, Danielle. Hi, everyone. I'm Gwen McCrae. I am the DEQ Environmental Justice Coordinator for the Northern Region. The Northern Region of DEQ goes from Loudoun County, south to Caroline County, and then Prince George County, west to kind of Madison, Orange County, Louisa County, that area. So I recognize a couple names of folks that I've connected with before, and I'm really looking forward to making more connections tonight. And our colleague Grace can introduce herself next.
Thanks. My name is Grace Holmes, and I am the Tidewater Regional DEQ Environmental Justice Coordinator. The Tidewater region includes the Eastern Shore of Virginia, which is where I'm actually from, and then goes out to Isle of Wight County and then north up to the Middle Peninsula area. So thank you guys so much for having us tonight. We really, really appreciate it. And we're really excited to connect this evening and then to continue to connect in the future as well.
I will share my screen.
All right, so I will kick us off here. An overview of our presentation this evening. We'll start with a bit of an introduction to DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality in Virginia, the mission, the vision, and the programs therein. A little bit specifically about the mission of DEQ's Environmental Justice Office, and then we'll each talk a little bit about our local initiatives and tools that have been developed. The next slide. So the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality's mission and vision is that Virginians all enjoy cleaner water, better air quality, and the productive reuse of land that was once contaminated. And so we work to protect the environment, which in turn should protect people. We implement air, water, land protection programs as directed by state and federal regulations. We issue permits to facilities to limit pollution and coordinate reporting for many different types of pollution across the Commonwealth. We perform inspections of permitted facilities to ensure compliance. We receive data of 100+ water quality monitoring sites, air quality monitoring sites, and assess pollution across the Commonwealth that way. We also perform environmental impact reviews, and we have additional areas and enforcement training. And we do have 6 regions throughout the Commonwealth. You can see them here, denoted by the colors. So you have Northern there, which is gray, Piedmont, which is teal, Glen, Allen Valley area. And then you have your, Tidewater, which is that blue over there. And then you have Piedmont, which is green, Southwest, which is yellow, Blue Ridge, which is orange. So you have all of those right in there, and Valley, which is orange, Blue Ridge, which is blue. I apologize. That would be very natural for it to be blue. All right, next slide, please. So one of the programs that we are responsible for is air. So we issue permits that limit air pollution throughout the Commonwealth for construction and operation of power plants, manufacturing facilities, and other businesses. That includes dry cleaners, all kinds of different things. We monitor air quality and issue air quality forecasts daily throughout the Commonwealth, and we issue those forecasts regionally. We receive data from about 50 monitoring sites across Virginia, and we'll look at a map of those in just a moment. And we manage more than $93 million a year for projects. Next slide, please. We have about 50 air quality monitors across the state, and they measure different types of pollution, as you can see denoted there. Ozone, particulate matter of different sizes. Denoted there, you see particulate matter at 2.5 microns and at 10 microns. To give you just a little bit of an idea of what that sizing is, a piece of hair is about 70 microns, so much smaller than that. So we're talking very small, as well as lead and several other things. And so we use meteorologists to use that monitor data to issue air quality forecasts, as I mentioned, which are issued regionally daily throughout the state. You can sign up if you're interested to receive those via email. And we also use planning staff. We also have planning staff that uses the data collected to make sure our programs continue to improve air quality throughout the Commonwealth. And measuring this pollution is really, really important because it helps give us a baseline and helps us understand where pollution might be coming from, where it might be a problem, and what we can do to improve it. And we also have grants through federal partners like the EPA to do more community-based air monitoring. And I'll talk a little bit about an example of that here in Tidewater a little bit later.
Apologies. DEQ's water and water supply program issues permits to limit pollution to Virginia's waters, reduce impacts to wetlands, and regulate biosolids. Biosolids are during the wastewater treatment process, liquids are separated from solids, and the solids are then treated physically and chemically to produce a semi-solid nutrient-rich product, which is biosolids. That's also known as sludge. The program also monitors the quality of Virginia's streams, rivers, lakes, and estuaries, and assesses the quality of state waters. DEQ also has a citizen monitoring program where you can nominate a water body for monitoring by DEQ, or you can apply for a water monitoring grant and be a citizen scientist. The program also issues permits for withdrawing groundwater and surface water for Virginians to have access to an adequate water supply. and ensures sustainable water resources and drought preparedness and activities to protect the Chesapeake Bay. Here's a map of all of the water monitoring sites across the state. Information from these monitoring stations is used to prioritize restoration activities and helps the Virginia Department of Environmental Health, sorry, to provide advisories for fishing and recreation. And here is, this was used in the recent water monitoring integrated report, which is on our website. DEQ's land and waste program issues permits to limit pollution of storage, treatment, and disposal of hazardous waste, and for the construction and operation or modification of a solid waste management facility. They also provide assistance for Superfund sites. They are polluted locations requiring a long-term response to clean up hazardous material contaminations due to hazardous waste being dumped, left out in the open, or otherwise improperly managed. They also provide assistance for brownfields. Those are redevelopment or reuse is more complicated due to the presence of hazardous materials, pollution, or contaminants, and also regulate underground storage tanks like gas stations. DEQ's compliance and enforcement team completes regular inspections and offers technical assistance, investigate pollution incidents, and bring violators back into compliance. And now I will turn it over to my colleague, Gwen.
All right, thank you. So that was kind of an overview of the programs that DEQ manages on a daily basis. And one of the things that we want to talk about tonight is the way that environmental justice has been an influence at the Department of Environmental Quality, and particularly in the past few years that has increased. So environmental justice, we're not going to go into kind of histories of environmental justice this evening, but in terms of regulation and statute, in 1994, there was an executive order from President Bill Clinton that kind of got the ball rolling as far as federal action on environmental justice. And so there were activities that started to kind of circulate around that in regulation, especially at the Environmental Protection Agency, so on that federal level. But at the state level, DEQ also began to look into environmental justice and to begin to implement some environmental justice principles in their daily activities. So as early as 2000, DEQ began to do training for their staff, particularly in the AIR program, where they trained staff about environmental justice, worked with the EPA's new environmental justice programs, and began to implement environmental justice, particularly when it came to complaint investigations and inspections. Next slide, please. So the inspection strategy is actually one of the first kind of, sort of daily activities that where DEQ started to implement environmental justice. In 2007, they created a role for an environmental justice coordinator to work within DEQ and EPA and to coordinate between the federal and state levels. They also began to work with the region, the EPA region that we are in, the Region 3, to work on a risk-based inspection strategy. And what that means is that our inspections, the scheduling and the frequency of inspections is determined by the type of permitted activity, and other kind of risk factors that might lead to concerns about pollution. And environmental justice, or the location of facilities within or near environmental justice areas, was included in that strategy of determining when, how often, and how frequently inspections would occur. And so that began again in the AIR program, and then that was expanded into the inspection strategies of all of our other core programs: water, air, solid waste, and hazardous waste. Next slide, please. So there are other ways that the department has been working on incorporating environmental justice into their operations. One of the things that they have been doing is to facilitate partnerships with some HBCUs in the state. They have signed memorandums of understanding with Norfolk State and Hampton University to create internship possibilities for students, to offer resources for students to encourage them to consider natural resource professions. So those MOUs were signed in 2009 and then kind of re-upped in 2014 and 2019. And those are currently still in place. Next slide. So then in 2020, and this is kind of the impetus for why our current Office of Environmental Justice now exists at the Department of Environmental Quality. In 2020, there were 4 environmental justice bills that were passed into law. The Environmental Justice Act, which is they're seen in its entirety, although the definitions, we'll talk about them a little bit later because they're quite important. So the Environmental Justice Act was passed, a law was passed to establish the Virginia Council on Environmental Justice, which is an advisory body to the governor. And then there were 2 policy statements in DEQ's establishment in the statute that direct the department to further environmental justice within the Commonwealth and to ensure fair treatment and meaningful involvement with regard to all of their activities. Next slide, please. So because the definitions are actually pretty important, I'm going to spend just a minute or two talking about those. So the Environmental Justice Act, again, this is the main body of the Environmental Justice Act, that it is the policy of the Commonwealth to promote environmental justice and ensure that it is carried out throughout the Commonwealth with a focus on environmental justice communities and fence-line communities, which are defined within the statute as well. Next slide, please. So they do define environmental justice as fair treatment and meaningful involvement. And one of the things that that particularly are important for the operations of the Department of Environmental Quality is that specifically it means regarding development, implementation, or enforcement of any environmental law, regulation, or policy, which is the purview of the Department of Environmental Quality, as well as other agencies in the state. Next slide. So fair treatment is specifically to make sure that there is no group of people that bears a disproportionate share of the consequences of any actions that have environmental consequences in the state. Next slide. And meaningful involvement is the requirement that community residents have not just access, well, yes, they have access and opportunities to participate, but also that decision makers will seek out that input and will allow that input to influence the decision. So these are, again, definitions that do exist in the statute. Next slide. So the Department of Environmental Quality's Office of Environmental Justice, after the Environmental Justice Act was passed in 2020, our office was established in the spring of 2021. They began by hiring a director and appointed a deputy director. And then there are 4 of us who are regional coordinators. We came on about a year ago in December of 2021. The mission of our office is to make sure that the aspects of that environmental justice law are implemented across all of DEQ programs. So that's that fair treatment and meaningful involvement for all of the development, implementation, and enforcement of laws, regulations, and across all DEQ programs. Some of the goals we have listed here, some of you may be familiar with a consultant that was hired to do a report about environmental justice at the Department of Environmental Quality. That report, which was done and then presented in 2019 and 2020, included several areas for implementation. So some of those are things like having staff capacity, which our Office of Environmental Justice fulfills that goal. But also to consider different kinds of guidance and tools, both within the agency and also that can be utilized by the public to make sure that there is information about environmental issues that affect people, that it's accessible and easy to access. Working on community engagement and building relationships, working on capacity building within environmental justice communities, and then also working with localities, with local governments, with county and city governments, and with regional development bodies as well. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we've been working on are these kind of larger statewide environmental justice initiatives, and I'll turn it over to Grace to talk in more detail about one of those.
Before we move on, I see a few questions in the chat. I wanted to circle back on those. I'm not able to view them, so I'm sharing my screen. Can someone else check them?
Sure. There's a question about Charlottesville. Charlottesville is actually in the Blue Ridge region. And so that is covered by our colleague, Chad Martin, who's not able to be here this evening, but we do have his contact information at the end. Let's see.
I think that was our only question. Do we have any more?
I'm seeing some introductions. I'm just wanting to make sure I didn't miss any questions.
Okay.
I think I got all the questions, but I'll continue reviewing them. And if I do see one, I'll that should be answered now, I will let us know.
Cool. Sounds great. So you guys might have noticed I just popped a couple links in the chat. So one of the statewide environmental justice initiatives that are really significant here in Virginia is our Virginia specific GIS EJ screening tool, which is called Virginia EJ Screen Plus. You can see some screenshots right there. I linked the tool in the chat as well as some training videos that go along with the tool. So those are some great resources. Some other statewide initiatives that we've worked with are enhanced outreach to communities living near facilities for engagement and participation in decision-making processes. So making sure that people are, first of all, aware, but second of all, know how to interact and know how to do that effectively. How to give public comment, what is public comment, how to expect it to come out in your newspaper. All of those things, are really important to make sure people are understanding. And so we do that outreach with communities and that capacity building. We also work on environmental justice education and training. We are currently developing an environmental justice academy that will be released statewide. That is a grant from the EPA. And so that will be a great tool throughout the Commonwealth that will also have the goal of capacity building in environmental justice communities. And then we will also be incorporating environmental justice into all of DEQ processes across the board. So within permitting, compliance, and enforcement. Next slide, please. So to talk a little bit about the Virginia EJ Screen Plus tools specifically, it is Virginia specific. And so what you see are the Virginia EJ indicators, which are defined by the Environmental Justice Act that Gwen was just referring to, that was passed in 2020. Those indicators are low income and community of color. Community of color is based on a statewide average of 37.8%. So any census block group, which is how the data is currently categorized within the tool, any census block group with a community of color average over 37.8% would be considered an environmental justice community according to those indicators, as well as low income, which is 30% or more of the population is under the housing and urban development federal 80% average median income, and under 2 times the federal poverty, 2 times the federal poverty level. So that's complicated. Can we go back one more? I'm sorry. So I know that was a little complicated and we'll look at those indicators here, but I do just want to emphasize that even though the data is currently organized by census block group, the data is more discrete than that in real time, like boots on the ground. So ground truthing with this tool is very important. And it's just a first step, you know, it's just a screening tool. And so it's very important to understand the impacts in communities on a smaller scale and more granular scale. To understand communities beyond these kinds of statistics is also really important in trying to help make these kinds of determinations. And I'll also note that community of color within the Environmental Justice Act is referred to as geographical area, while low income is specifically referred to by census block group. This is public facing on the DEQ website. So you guys have that link there. It's open for use, and please feel free to share it with anybody. Next slide, please. So you can see here an array of census block groups across the Commonwealth that are under that 80% AMI from the Housing and Urban Development federally. So those are all across the state. You can see that they really span all the way from the Eastern Shore out to the Valley region. And then next slide, please. And the other indicator is communities of color. And you can see that that is concentrated more towards the eastern part of the state. And I do want to note, of course, that this is just a screening tool, and this doesn't necessarily represent, you know, the exact location of environmental justice communities across the state. Next slide, please. Really important to mention about the tool that is really great is that we have DEQ media layers. So any media layer that DEQ has available via GIS has been loaded into the tool. So that includes air, biosolids, land, pollution. We have our pollution response. So you can see if we've had a pollution response in the area recently. You can see all of our permits, or a lot of our permits, not every single one. But everything that we have already on GIS. We have our water quality layers, our renewable energy layers, a lot of great information. And those are all really, really important for understanding kind of the spatial makeup of where the permits are across the state, as well as where monitoring is taking place across the state. Important to note, though, we also have community resource layers, which include community centers, faith centers, schools, health departments, housing developments, libraries, you know, these kinds of community centers that really are where people gather within these communities. And those are really important to have on here too, because it helps, you know, kind of identify who is around this area. And it's a good first step in deciding, you know, who are you going to reach out to? Who do you need to be engaging? Who are the folks who are making up this community? And those are often great places to find folks who are interested and to kind of catch them in places that they're already going and meet them where they're at. And then I should also mention that we also have EPA screen, EJ screen 2.0 layers are available on the tool, as well as some other reference layers. We just finished uploading MEB data, which is most effective basin data, which is data from the federal EPA about the Chesapeake Bay program that gives PDCs across the state basically an idea of where EJ communities are in the most need within their regions. So that has been something that was suggested to us as something that would be really helpful for folks to have. And so we were able to get it added. And I will say it took about 2 months to get it added. So it's kind of a process, but I want to mention that because this is a flexible tool. You know, we want to keep developing it. It will continue to go through rounds of development. So if you find yourself using the tool and you see something, hey, this should be on there, this could be better, this didn't work for me, please let us know, because we always want to hear your feedback. And then the last thing I'll say about it is that there are reporting tools on the on the tool. So if you would like to pull a Virginia specific EJ screen report, you're able to do that. And then you can also pull reports from the federal EPA EJ screen from our tool as well. Oh, and one more thing that I forgot to mention, I'm so sorry. The Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative also has an EJ screening tool that they've been working on for the state, and that is linked at the top of our tool. So I definitely encourage you guys to check out their tool as well. Next slide. Cool. I'll pass it back to Gwen.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, we did want to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about some of the issues that we have been seeing or made aware of in the regions that we cover. So I wanted to briefly talk about a couple of things up here in the northern region. One of them is the Dominion Energy Possum Point plant, which is formerly, it's an energy plant that now burns natural gas, but formerly was burning coal. And so they do have coal residuals, coal combustion residuals. There was a 2019 law that requires cleanup and recycling of coal combustion residuals throughout the state. The Possum Point site is one of those sites that needs to be cleaned up. Dominion Energy had been working with, had been in conversation with some of the communities there in that area, and just a few weeks ago submitted their Part A application for creating a landfill for the coal combustion residuals on the site. That was one of several options that they had been considering, including removing the coal combustion residuals by truck or by train, but that is the one that they are currently proposing. So that Part A application, that is the first part of the application, which is focused just on the siting of the proposed landfill. And so that is received in DEQ and is being reviewed for completeness. But there will be opportunities for public input on that application in the future. Another facility that has been getting some attention is in Louisa County, near the town of Zion Crossroads. Boxley Materials had opened a portable asphalt plant. So in Virginia, asphalt plants have a couple of different ways that a couple of different permits that they utilize. So an asphalt plant can have a permanent permit, but it can also operate under a portable permit, because if you think about the locations that where asphalt needs to be constructed and then utilized for road projects, for example. So they often will utilize portable permits. Boxley has a permanent permit for a location in Southwest Virginia, but they opened a portable permit in Zion Crossroads. The issue with this particular location is that it is adjacent and very close to a home. So it's one person's home, but it's quite close. And so there have been a lot of concerns about the proximity of that asphalt plant to that home. Currently, the portable permit that they were operating under has expired, but they have applied to make that a permanent location. So it is, even though their permanent or their portable permit has expired, it is still a potential issue because they have requested for that to be a permanent location. So that also is an application that has been received by DEQ, but they are currently in the process of working on air quality monitoring, air quality modeling in order to determine what that permit would look like. Another issue that had come to my attention, actually the Fredericksburg branch of the NAACP had contacted me about the Mayfield community in Fredericksburg, which is adjacent to a railroad yard, and there were concerns or continue to be concerns about both locomotives, the diesel locomotives, and also the contents of train cars that are either moving through or are parked for a day or two before they get moved through. and concerns about the contents of what might be in those rail cars. So DEQ doesn't have any authority over rail transit. However, so DEQ generally would regulate the storage of hazardous materials, but not the transit of hazardous materials. That being said, for the Mayfield community, if there's anyone on the call this evening, there are certainly issues of air quality that could come up when it comes to diesel locomotives, or if there are concerns about, about potential spills or things like that, DEQ would respond to those kinds of questions as well. So I would encourage anyone who has continued concerns about that, please to get in touch with me. I also briefly want to mention, it's not on the slide here, but we did get a question via email about data centers. So I know that up here in Northern Virginia, we have a lot of data centers either already operating or in proposed data centers. DEQ does regulate the air for data centers. They do have to get air permits because they have diesel generators. Those permits are focused on controlling emissions that are included in the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. Those are sometimes referred to as the NAQS. And there are 6 pollutants that are regulated under the NAQS. There was a specific question about methane and kind of emissions from methane when those diesel generators are tested each week. Methane is not one of the 6 criteria pollutants of the NAQS, and so methane is currently, particularly for data centers, methane is currently not regulated by DEQ. That is, I think that one of the things about the operation of DEQ is that the tools that we have are regulations and statutes. And so if there isn't a statute or a regulation that controls methane, for example, it's not included in the permits, and therefore it's not part of our enforcement authority. That being said, one of the things that I think is really important when it comes to questions about air quality, questions about facilities, is that the development of these regulations and the development of those, the regulations that will lead to the permits that DEQ grants, there are opportunities for public input in those processes. And so I do think that as the office, as the office becomes more established, certainly one of the things that we will be working on is encouraging a easier way for community members to participate in the process of developing regulations, so that if the regulation of methane is something that the community wants, that perhaps that is something that can be brought up in that process of regulatory development. Okay, so we'll certainly be able to respond to any other questions. I know we had a question about solar facilities, but perhaps we can let the other coordinators talk about their updates, and then we can circle back to answering that question that was in the chat about solar.
Sure. My name is Danielle again. I'm the Piedmont Environmental Justice Coordinator. I'll go through a few of the projects that I've been working on since I've been working with the agency. First, in late October of 2021, water samples from the Chickahominy River Basin were collected as part of a multi-year study by Newport News Waterworks, which uses the river as a source of public drinking water, and it showed elevated levels of PFAS. Then a unified command work group was formed mainly between Henrico's Department of Public Utilities, the Virginia Department of Health, and Department of Environmental Quality. Henrico County tested over 250 private water wells near the White Oak Swamp Creek area for PFAS. However, in June of 2022, the EPA recently changed its interim updated health advisory levels for PFOA and PFOS PFOA and PFOS. There are specific types of PFAS, and the final health advisory levels for Gen X chemicals and PFBS. So we are continuing to work on that issue. The wastewater treatment plants across the state, DEQ is looking at ways to help find funding for rural infrastructure where in places where localities may not have that funding or that support. In fact, we met with SERCAF, Soap Cupid, this week to talk about that in more detail for Charles City County as well as Sussex County. In Charles City County, DEQ is working with the county to address potential noncompliance at the county's 4 wastewater treatment plants. Happy to go into more discussion on that, of what's going on there. Landfills has been a big concern, and I've heard from EJ community since I've started working here. Specifically, there is a landfill in Charles City County where there were concerns about air quality and water quality that we've engaged and helped answer questions about. There were additional concerns about other proposed projects nearby, a Chickahominy pipeline, the C4GT power station, the Chickahominy power generation station. Those projects are no longer in progress. There is a proposed landfill in Cumberland County, and the agency, as well as the EJ office, has been on call to ask questions of what the community wants to know and get answers for the community, as well as help people engage on various permits and let them know when they can engage on those permits and public comment periods. Petersburg has a closed landfill called the Tri-City Landfill, and we have worked with leaders there to connect them with contacts at the Department of Health to be able to ask questions, get answers. And lastly, we've been working with residents to be more involved in resiliency planning in the Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula. Overall, a lot of our job is helping EJ communities engage on proposed projects of concern, such as landfills, septic tanks, and gas stations. That's been my work with it, at least, and listening to communities' concerns and helping to find those answers. That's all I have. Next, what would have been our colleague from Blue Ridge, but I will not speak for him, but to attempt to cover what his work has been thus far. The Bristol landfill closed earlier this year and is no longer accepting trash. The community is still in ongoing communications regarding mitigation there. The Department of Environmental Quality is working with the Virginia Department of Health and the Western Virginia Water Authority to investigate the source of Gen X. Gen X is a chemical that was detected in the Roanoke River, Spring Hollow Reservoir, and associated drinking water supply that serves portions of Roanoke, Franklin, and Botetourt counties. Gen X is a trade name for one of thousands of man-made compounds known generally as forever chemicals, or PFAS. And this information is on our website and will continue to be updated. This, of course, is the same issue that I'm working on in Piedmont. I will turn it over to Grace.
Thanks, Danielle. So we just got a couple questions in the chat. Okay, maybe let's just ask. So PFAS, Danielle, it's perfluoroalkyl.
Sure I'm saying it correctly. I will look it up to make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly.
I'm so sorry that I can't say it off the top of my head. But it's a chemical that is pretty ubiquitous in the environment. It's been found in a lot of places all over the country, and it's kind of what we consider an emerging contaminant because it's something that we're just kind of now getting a grasp on across the whole country.
It's perfluoroalkyl substances and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It's often found in nonstick cookware or raincoats, things that defy nature, basically, and don't allow things to stick. Yeah. Deli paper, the paper that covers your deli meat in the grocery store, things like that.
Yeah, and as Grace said, it's something that's considered an emerging contaminant. It's something that the that at the federal level has been also getting just a lot more attention. So there's been a lot of kind of baseline studies to try and understand where it is. And EPA is in the process of developing different kind of levels of just trying to understand the impact on human health. And particularly, they do have some guidance that they have proposed, rules that they've proposed about the levels of PFAS that in drinking water. But I think other kind of environmental levels have not yet been. We don't have proposed regulations on those yet.
Yep. Okay. So I know we had a couple other questions, but if it's okay, I'm gonna try and quickly go through this, and then I will make sure to get back to those as we're having discussion at the end. So I'm going to try and keep it brief, but I can get long-winded about this, so I'll work on it. So the Tidewater Air Monitoring and Evaluation Project, or the TAME project, has been a big thing that I have been working on in the Tidewater region. The project is an EPA grant-funded project to take a hyper-local community look at air quality in 2 environmental justice communities in Hampton Roads, Lambert's Point and Norfolk, and East End of Newport News. Those areas were chosen specifically because of historic, long-held concerns there from citizens based on air quality. Those are for a myriad of reasons, but notably due to the proximity of coal terminals near these neighborhoods. Norfolk Southern is located adjacent to the Lambert's Point neighborhood in Norfolk and is one of the largest coal processing ports in the entire Northern Hemisphere. And then there are two coal piers in East End of Newport News, which are Kinder Morgan and Dominion. There's also shipbuilding industry in Newport News, as well as other industry, and then traffic emissions from 664 that circles Newport News and Hampton Boulevard, which is a big corridor for truck traffic for the Port of Virginia. So there's heavy traffic there too. So those are all concerns that folks have in these areas about their air quality that have led to this hyper local look. And so to give you an idea of what's different about this project versus what we talked about earlier with air quality monitoring across the state, those monitors are usually set up, one within like a huge area to kind of give you an average of a regional look at what the air quality is. This project is a concentrated look at a specific air quality in a neighborhood. Another difference here is that oftentimes these kinds of monitors they're called regulatory grade monitors. We'll be looking at particulate matter at 10 microns and 2.5 microns. And generally these kinds of monitors, they have a lot of siting requirements to make sure that the data is EPA certified. And so those siting requirements are easily met if you can put one of these monitors on like top of a building or something like that. But as you can imagine, the monitor on top of a building is not giving you an accurate representation of what you're breathing 6 feet off the ground. So the idea here is that we're placing these monitors at ground level, and we're also placing 4 in Lambert's Point and 5 in East End, which is a really, really concentrated network of these EPA certified regulatory grade monitors. And it's a really great hyper local look at what people are breathing. We are working on getting those monitors installed currently. At this time, we've had 3 meetings with each community. We had meetings in April of this year, in July of this year, and then in October of this year. And then we've done a lot of outreach at faith events and different community celebrations outside of faith communities in Norfolk and different engagement opportunities, and we'll continue to do that throughout the study period. Our goal for installation of the regulatory grade monitors is March of 2023, and at the point of installation, monitoring will start and will continue for 18 months after installation. Once the data is finished being collected, it will go to the Virginia Department of Health to provide a health risk assessment to the community based on the data. And I will mention that we should have data about 45 to 60 days out from our first monitoring round, which will be a week after installation. And we will be providing that data to the community as we receive it. And so we will not be holding it until the end of the project or anything like that. We'll be giving it to the community as we are receiving it. Relatedly, and then I'm gonna stop, and I put the link in the chat so you guys can look into it and give me a call if you want to talk more. But relatedly to the regulatory grade monitors, we're also putting up a network of what we call purple air sensors. These are not regulatory grade data, but it's still very precise air quality data. And we're placing 8 of those across each neighborhood. So plug, if you know people who live in these neighborhoods who you think might be interested, please send them my way because we're still working on deploying those. All you need is a Wi-Fi password and a outdoor power outlet. And it takes me like 15 minutes to install it. And so we are installing those so that folks can use those to take a instantaneous look at the air quality in their area. And it also records data for as long as it's on. And so you can pull data for as long as it's been collecting. So if you're curious about what the air quality was on October 7th, for whatever reason, you can go back and pull that data. So that's a really big piece here, making sure that the community has as much access to this data as absolutely possible. And that I also linked in the chat, so you can take a look at the air sensors that are live in Lambert's Point and in East End right now. And you'll also notice there are sensors all across the country. These are really, really cool, and they've been used by a lot of like citizen groups to drive decision-making in their communities. It's like a citizen community scientist tool. So it's really, really cool. And I would encourage you to check that out too. And then I will just—
Hey, Grace,
yeah.
Before you move on to talking about Port 460, there are a couple of questions in the chat that were specifically about TAME.
Sure. Sorry. We are hoping the monitors will be installed March of 2023. And we are getting schools involved. We are really excited to have our HBCUs here in Hampton, in Hampton Roads, Hampton University and Norfolk State will be providing interns for the project once the monitors have been installed. And that's based on that MOU that Gwen mentioned earlier. Those HBCUs get priority for our internships. And so we'll also be working with like local school aged kids on this as well, like on different, we're hoping to do a weather balloon demonstration at the beginning of next year with a local professor from Hampton University, actually. We're also hoping to maybe work with a couple of the environmental science teachers once we have the Purple Air Monitor networks completely deployed. And we've reached out to them and we're working on connecting. And then I'm also working with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation Student Leadership Program. They have this really cool advocacy internship program, and I'm going to be getting their advocate interns involved as well to work with the community and help connect them to resources for the project, even outside of DEQ. And we've actually connected to the Move Forward network as well as the Union for Concerned Scientists that I think are going to be really great for capacity building around the data processing and capacity building outside of DEQ, so the community kind of has a different third party to talk to about that. And then the TAME project is not currently being replicated in other areas. It is an EPA grant funded project and it was pretty competitive. I will mention that we applied for a similar grant this last round in Hampton, based on citizen concerns that I was working with over there off of the King Street corridor. And unfortunately, we didn't receive that grant, but I know that the want is there from our air quality monitoring folks. They want to keep doing projects like this. So I think we're definitely hopeful that we will start to see more of these kind of hyper local community-based air quality projects across the state. And I will just highlight that Hopewell is another example of this taking place. And Hopewell now has a permanent monitoring site as a result of that project. I told you guys I'll be long-winded about it, so I'll stop there. But please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. If you'd like me to come talk to a group that you know in the Hampton Roads area about the project, I'd love to. Just let me know. I'm really flexible this month, so just reach out. And then I'll mention just briefly the Virginia Wetlands permit that we are in process with a developer on a project called Port 460 in Suffolk. You may have heard of it. It was in the news a couple of months ago. Basically, this is a rather large distribution facility that they are proposing in Suffolk. It will be going on a piece of land that is a little over 500 acres, so it's very big. It is projected at this time to impact about 7.5 acres of wetlands, and we are currently working with the developer to get an appropriate application in-house. So we don't even have an application completed for this permit at this time. The city, I think 2 months ago, voted to rezone the area from agricultural residential to heavy industrial. So at this time, it looks like the project is moving forward. And we've been working with community groups there who have major concerns about this project happening in their area, to make sure they're aware of what's going on. They're aware of where we are in the process with the permit. They're aware when it ends up coming out and how to give public comment. We've been working kind of on the front end to make sure people have all of that information. And last I heard, there were over 200 letters prepped for when public comment opens. So we're definitely making sure that folks are able to get their opinions heard there. And then I'll just kind of, like Danielle said, I don't want to go too far into each citizen that I've worked with so far, but we've worked all across the Tidewater region with folks who have specific concerns in their neighborhoods, in their cities, and their regions. And so we try to make sure they're connected to the right people. And, when people give us a call and it's about drinking water and we don't regulate drinking water, we try to make sure we're connecting them to the right person, giving them a phone number, calling that person, letting them know to expect a call, just kind of trying to make sure that we're providing that connection point and we're not just telling people, sorry, that's not us, And how long before Port 460 land goes underwater? In terms of sea level rise projections?
Yes, that's what I'm referring to, sinking land and rising sea.
Yes, I'll be honest with you, Randy, I do not know off the top of my head. I'm sure that there's a projection for it somewhere, but yes, an important consideration. And
I used to work in the shipping industry, so I know areas around ports, and I really have to wonder if that developer has paid attention to that particular issue. If it's next to a wetland, it can't be that high above water.
It's a great point. And a part of the reason that we're still working with them on getting an application in-house is because we have some very specific requirements for how they are able to work within those wetlands. And we want to make sure we mitigate that to the very greatest extent. So I know I talked us right up until past 8. I'm so sorry, but hopefully you guys can stick around and we can have a little bit more discussion and answer some of these other questions in the chat here.
Okay, I'm going to be very quick. It's only a few more slides. So You can find more information on our website, DEQ.virginia.gov. There's an events calendar. There's a webpage of topics of interest, which includes some of the top projects that we have mentioned tonight. There's fact sheets or mapping tools in general, but like our Virginia EJ Screen Plus is also on the website. It's hard to find, so we can definitely walk you through how to find that, and laws and regulations, and you can report pollution on there and much more. So feel free to visit deq.virginia.gov. Here's a regional map again of how DEQ breaks up all the counties into a region, and our names are color coordinated with the region that we service. Chad, though, resides and works in Blue Ridge, but also does work in Southwest, which is yellow, and Valley, which is orange. And here is our contact information, emails and phone numbers in case you need to reach out to us or if you need to share our information with anyone else. And I will leave the slide here for a minute if folks want to take a picture or record that information down.
And in the meantime, I think we have some questions here. I think the first one was Randy's question back earlier. What is DEQ's role in approving solar and projects?
So the DEQ does approve solar projects that are 150 megawatts or smaller. And that is a process that's called the permit by rule. So my understanding, and I'm not an expert in solar, in the solar projects, but my understanding is what that means is that if a developer meets all of the criteria that had been laid out in the regulation rule, then the permit would be granted. I do know that earlier this spring there were some changes that were made to the stormwater calculations for solar projects, and so that was a change that happened earlier this year. But yeah, the kind of for the most part, what happens is that it's granted through permit by rule. For any facilities that would be larger than 150 megawatts, I would actually have to look that up, but I would be happy to do so and get back to you about those questions. So if you want to share your contact information with either with Karen, and then she can pass it on to us, or if you want to reach out to one of us just with contact information, I would be happy to look that up and get back to you with more information about the solar projects.
And I would add to that, the permit by rule program, the public comment process is managed by the permit applicant, not by DEQ.
Awesome. The next question we have in the chat is, can you give a quick overview of the citizen boards, air pollution, water control, waste management? And honestly, I'm not an expert on those boards, and there's been some changes according to the last legislative session. So we might also need to follow up with you, John, unless someone else has more information than I do. Okay. Yeah, John, we'll follow up with you on that. There's been some changes according to the state legislature and how those operate recently. So I don't want to speak out of turn there. So I'll make sure to follow up with you on that question.
There is information on our website about those in more detail as well.
Is there a collaborative effort between DEQ and Virginia Organizing's Environmental Justice Strategy Committee? If not, what are the steps to initiate a collaboration? I'm not aware of one unless someone else is.
I met with Virginia Organizing a few months ago, but I didn't know there was an EJ strategy.
Yeah, same. I've worked with a couple folks here in Norfolk with Virginia Organizing with the TAME project, but hadn't heard about this committee. So it sounds like maybe the steps are we should reach out and see if there's an opportunity to collaborate. So thank you for highlighting that. That sounds like a great connection that we should be making. Awesome, Kim. And yeah, please reach out. We're definitely interested in connecting and seeing how we can help each other move environmental justice forward in the Commonwealth. Okay. Have you all done an investigation in the Waynesboro area due to the DuPont toxics which were dumped in the South River? Also, since the area is on the water table, the city is planning to build a natural history museum in 2023, and I was wondering if it would be safe. I know that there is currently an investigation taking place, I believe, into the water quality in that area. I am not sure or aware of that we've identified a source. I'm not sure, honestly. It's not my region. I apologize.
Our colleague who couldn't make it tonight, unfortunately, he covers this region, so we can definitely connect you with him for more information.
Yes, Joyce, we'll make sure to do that. Chad, that's his region, and I would hate to say something incorrect since I'm not exactly sure. So we'll make sure to connect you with Chad. When will the monitors be installed? We got that one. Are Virginia's tribe members being involved in planning updates, etc.? Gwen has a little bit of experience here.
Yeah. So the answer is yes, but there's still a long way to go with coordination with the tribes. So some of you may remember that in late in Governor Northam's administration, there was an executive order that was created for tribal consultation with the 7 federally recognized tribes in Virginia. So we were in the process of coordinating with the tribes and the other natural resource agencies to identify their areas of interest and the topics upon which they would like to be consulted, and the correct staff or elected officials or leaders to be contacted for consultation. So that was specifically about the formal consultation process, and there was a limited number of particular types of projects that would require that formal consultation. The status of that executive order is a little bit nebulous at the moment. That being said, even in the absence of that kind of formal consultation process, DEQ still coordinates with the tribes, both the federally recognized tribes and the state recognized tribes, particularly on the staff level when there are issues that come up that affect the tribes. There are staff that are working within our programs who have connections with the staff at the tribal level, in the tribal governments. Of course, any tribal community member is always welcome to participate in the public process, the same as anyone else, but the kind of specifically connections with tribal governments do happen on that level. But as I said, there's still a long way to go, and sort of developing more robust kind of processes for making sure that happens, and for bringing tribes into questions about planning. I know that many of the tribes are interested in questions of groundwater planning, for example, and so those are questions that are currently being worked on.
And then I saw we got another question, kind of a statement here about the air quality monitoring in Pulaski County. I can't speak to the air quality monitoring plan. I will say it is on our website, and I can also highlight this as a future grant opportunity maybe that we could apply for. And I will highlight that the TAME project is grant funded, and these are very expensive projects to run. So the grant funding is really, really necessary. But I will mention, just so you know, on our website, you can look at the kind of more regional air quality monitoring that's happening, and there is some air quality monitoring happening in Roanoke, as well as Winchester, and a few other areas that you could take a look at if you're interested. And we can make sure to connect you with that link if you'd like.
And we're also happy to connect you with Chad again, who's the coordinator for that region, who may know more specifics than we do, more than likely, about the project.
Definitely.
Are there any other questions? Folks can also raise their hand if you don't want to put it into the chat. Or just unmute.
We really appreciate your time this evening. We know it's an evening on a Thursday, so just really appreciate you guys being with us and connecting with us.
Absolutely. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. If one of us specifically, if you have a particular regional question, but any of us are happy to get you connected with the right people. Please do reach out.
And if there's any other venue or that you would like us to join you in to do this kind of presentation, or something more specific about something specific we talked about that we could go more in depth on, please don't hesitate to reach out. We really are looking forward to connecting with more folks, and we're always really excited to meet new community members. So please let us know.
Yeah. I see a comment in the chat about returning for updates. So yeah, we would be happy to. Anytime we're invited, we'll be happy to come back.
Absolutely. And thank you, Karen, so much. We really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. And maybe we can make it like a quarterly thing or something where you come back and just regularly update folks. And if there are any, hyper local programs people can join. It seems as if there is a huge interest in the air quality monitoring programs in particular, as to how different communities can get that program in, and because they have some local issues. So maybe we can get some more information on that and see how different communities can also do that. And that seems to be one of the big things, as well as informing folks about what are those toxic materials. Sometimes there may be some local issues, but they just don't really understand or have the information as to what to look out for. So like when you define PFAS, I noticed that President Coleman had brought up a plant in her community that she's now interested in finding out more information about. So I think definitely coming in and talking about those things. But I did have one question, if there was, if you have time for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you'd mentioned that methane is one of the
I'm gonna go ahead because
I'm sorry, was that you, Hope? Did you
I was gonna say I would go ahead and ask and see if they can still do the meetings every quarter like you stated.
Yes.
We would be happy to, definitely.
And especially if there's things you want us to do a deeper dive into, like PFAS or like
Yes,
air monitoring, happy to do that.
Yes.
PFAS is a big concern.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So if we can, I think that's a great idea. If we can have a dedicated or, something about that, or, tying it in with air quality or something like that, but more info.
And we may be able to bring in other, this is the environmental justice team, but there's definitely experts who work in those specific areas. If we may be able to bring them in as well, if we know in advance.
Yeah.
Karen, you were going to say something. Did you want to? I interrupted you. Were you going to ask the question or?
It was just a teeny tiny question, and then I can switch it over to you, Hope. Thanks for reminding me too. You had mentioned that methane isn't one of the it wasn't something that DEQ was able to regulate. Is there something that can be done to get it as one of those, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. There was some discussion of creating some regulations for methane specifically for power plants, because power plants, landfills, and livestock are the three biggest sources of methane. So that was a conversation that was happening a couple of years ago, and I think that it would be at the statutory, the statutory level where you would have to have that conversation begin, unless it comes down from the federal level, because I believe that the EPA is also there was just an announcement from COP27 about the EPA saying that they were going to propose a rule about regulating methane leaks in gas production and energy production. So it is kind of on the radar, but at the moment, that's kind of the limit of it. And those are regulations that would be specific for energy production and perhaps for landfills and for leaks, but I don't know that that would extend to a generator, for example, which was kind of where the question had come up. So that would probably require a different scope of legislation.
Yeah, I think to do that, it would have to get added federally by the EPA to the national air quality standards, and become one of the criteria pollutants for that.
So a heavy lift is what you're saying.
It's a heavy lift, yeah.
Hope, did you
You
have a
have a question? Well, just to follow up, the hazardous air pollutants HAPs, I think that's what it's called.
Mhm.
Does that not fall under that?
I tried to do a quick bit of like reviewing this information before the meeting, and I didn't see that it was part of the hazardous the list of hazardous chemicals or hazardous air pollutants. I'll double check that, and if I'm mistaken, I'll be sure to follow up. But I don't believe that it is in that it's in that list either.
Well, I guess I thought anything that wasn't regulated fell under there, but so there's a list. So that
Yeah.
messes up my theory. Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay,
There's been a lot of ongoing conversation about it, basically.
okay. And guys, I want to tell you, since you all are at this level, meeting community members such as ourselves, it helps build trust and in a rapport that all of us can work together and you can really hear our voices. So I do appreciate you doing this, especially in the evening when most people are working and get off. Because like I said, I just got home at 6:30 to make this meeting. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
We try our best to be accommodating. So
I think Randy has a question he would like to raise, and then KDH, and then I know we said an hour, but if you guys can give us 90 minutes, that'd be awesome. So let's just say we've got 7 that we planned for 90 because we were going back and forth anyway, right?
Yeah.
And the universe was trying to tell us 90 and we wouldn't listen. So if you guys can just bear with us for a few minutes. So Randy, if you can go, and then we'll be followed by.
Well, not a question, but a story. I was with the State Department for 33 years, and one of the problems we face when going overseas is pollution. And New Delhi and Beijing and Shanghai were among the most polluted posts. I think Mexico City was too. So the embassy installed air quality monitors on the roofs of the embassy. And then they publicized the data. And guess what? It was showing much worse problems than the local government had admitted. And this forced them to be much more accurate and transparent to their citizens and led to some reforms. So this demonstrates the power of being transparent with good quality data on air quality.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Kimberly, you had your hand raised. Thank you for that, Randy.
I hope my phone doesn't sound too bad, does it?
No.
No, it's fine.
Okay, good. I'll talk quickly just in case some weird stuff. Thank you for this. The Facebook ad helped. I meant to share it in other groups. I was just so excited, I forgot. I did have 2 quick questions. Is this recording available? And number 2, the poles that are being installed in what appears to be already congested neighborhoods across this state. Many of us don't want them there because we know they're going to be linked to 5G. There's upgraded power. I don't know if it's a power plant per se, but structures that have been upgraded like way beyond what they were. Is this going to be a methane gas problem?
So
Um,
are you talking about like 5G towers?
Yes.
Okay. I am not aware of methane or other emissions from the 5G towers, but I'm not an expert on it. And so I will say again that as far as DEQ goes, the tools that we have are the regulations that are in existence. And so we would have to look and see what kind of regulations there currently are about anything that has emissions. As far as I know, I'm not aware of emissions from those, but I am always open to getting more information if you have information about that.
Okay, thank you. And I left a comment for you, Gwendolyn.
Yes,
Thank you for your detailed answer.
you're very welcome. Thank you for your questions.
Your recording be made available to us.
oh, Karen, I think you're muted.
Yes, the recording will be made available to everyone who signed up, and I'll also be posting it on the ECJ Facebook page as well. So you'll have access to it. All right, was that a wave goodbye, Randy, or you had another? That was a wave goodbye. Okay, so I don't see any other questions, and I just want to make sure everybody had an opportunity to ask questions or get their comment out before we conclude the meeting. So I'll just give everybody a few more seconds to kind of think to see if there are any thoughts. And while people are thinking, nope, I don't see anything. So if you, Grace, Gwen, or Danielle, if you have any parting words to close us out, that would be wonderful. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us and learn more about DEQ, and that this will be the first conversation of many. The more information we get out is the more we are able to participate. So thank you for joining us today. And I'll leave it to our friends from DEQ to close us out.
Well, I would just say thank you so much for inviting us. And I really appreciate the opportunity to connect and to hear about the questions that you have and the issues, that you've brought to our attention that maybe we didn't know about. So I think that these kinds of meetings are incredibly valuable to the work that all of us are doing. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, same. Thank you guys so much for the time. We really appreciate it. And we definitely want to continue to find ways to connect. So thank you, Karen, for having us, and thank you guys for inviting us into your space. And please let us know as we can continue to do this kind of presentation work. And then of course, let us know if you have concerns around environmental justice in our regions. We want to connect and we want to talk and we want to see what we can do to find action items and work towards solutions. So we just really appreciate you and thank you guys so much. We look forward to continuing to connect.
And lastly, thank you, Karen, for the idea to have this call. And let's sharing the same sentiment. Let's continue having more conversations like this in your community and here as well. So thank you so much.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. And until the next time, have a good day or rest of the evening and be well.
Have a good year.
Thank you guys so much. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.